Hey YouTube, well it's the last Friday I believe in May, and we've had quite a storm here. You can see there's a lot of evidence of washing and rain washing and stuff. So we've had rain for the past couple of days. Anyway, I'm up to, I put this log on here and I want to cut this into as many pieces as I can for the garage. So what I just wanted to show you was there's a lot of branches on this thing. I'm not sure what this is. It might be a white oak, but I'm not positive. But you can see the where the knots were, or not knots, where the branches have been cut off. So there's quite a few on there. I'm not sure what size I'm going to get out of this. Let's take a look here. Well, it looks like I've got 10 inches there, but it's not gonna. I might get an 8x8 out of that cant. I have gotten some questions about cants and stuff from different people. If you haven't had geometry in school, then trying to figure out, you know, how the cants are calculated and stuff might be a little bit harder, but it's not really that bad. Most people can take the diameter times the number 7 and come up with the number that you need, and that's fine. But I think in a different sense of it, so I kind of go with looking at my chart. But anyway, what you're looking for is you're looking for a square that's inside of a circle. Okay, so one of the ways to figure that out is if you have a square in a circle and you work with the diagonal of the square, you can measure the length and or the side and the top of the cant to get yourself a rough idea. So it's not like you have to have a chart really. I mean, the chart just is handy, that's all. But you can do what I said there to find out what size cant you're going to use. One of the things that you guys have to remember is that my cant size, the way I do it is I measure from bark to bark. In other words, I measure from the inside of the bark, like from here, okay, to here. So that's where I get my measurements. So you see I'm 12.5 there. And if I look up here, 12 is an 8.5 cant, 13 is 9.2. So I should be able to pull an 8-inch cant out of this. But how bad the wood's going to be will be determined as I cut it open, because you have all these branches on this thing. I mean, on this side alone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On the top, 1, 2. On that right side, 1, 2, 3, 4 branches. So this wasn't the very base of the tree. This was more like the, where the tree lies out. There's the top part that I cut off of that. So I'm going to start the saw up, let it warm up, and then we'll get going with cutting this and see just where it ends up. We might be able to get an 8x8 cant out of it. That's what I'm shooting for. I was looking at the backhoe this morning when I started it. The tailpipe there, that last little piece of pipe is breaking off right at the muffler, and I've welded it about 15 times already over the years. So I think I'm going to have to get a new muffler. I'm going to have to measure that and check it out. I'm pretty sure they have something at Tractor Supply. Maybe I'll get a rain cap for the top of it as well. Okay, so we've got the one flitch off. Now I got to turn that. We'll take a look at what we get from the next one. Also, somebody had asked me how thick I usually make the first flitch. The flitches, you can't answer that question with how thick unless you're purposely cutting shorter than the cant size. I try to cut right down to the cant whenever I can, so I don't have to fool around with a lot of small cuts and stuff, and trying to remove bark on the edges. So right now what I'm looking for is I've cut off at here probably 2.5 inches, maybe 2 inches, and that gives me an 8-inch cant all the way down. And you can see the board is flat and it's at least 8 inches wide all the way down. So now I'm going to turn it the other way, cut off the smallest amount I can so that I can keep it flat. And that's what I want to do, and how I judge how much flitch to take off. I just go by the cant size. Now I'm not saying that you have to do that, because you can cut small pieces off, make it easier to carry. Like this here, taking this off this morning was kind of hard pulling off of there for me, but I got it off. But I'm just saying, you can turn it and take off whatever size you want depending upon what you need and how much time you want to spend on something. Alright, so when it comes to cutting that flitch off, it's the same story as before. You want to make sure that the board is against your backstop totally, so it's nice and flat. Same thing with that one up there, okay? The flatter you keep your cuts, and the more square you keep them. In other words, keep this tight against here. You'll end up with a nice square cant to work with. Right here, I'm saying. You'll end up with a nice square cant, and that'll give you very nice pieces of lumber. So I'm gonna check and see what I have here now. In order to figure this out, I can just look at this and pretty much tell you what I'm gonna do with this. But what you can do is take a tape measure and measure along and find where the lowest bark line is, and you can cut at that mark. So let me just show you that. If I measure from the rail up, I get 13 inches here, I get 12 inches there, 13.5. So what I need is the lowest one. So I need to cut 12 inches off the bunk rail. So from the bottom up, 12 inches will give me no flitch, or very little, if any, off of the cant. So that's what I'm going to cut next there. 12 inches up. white oak. This thing is as heavy as Okay, so you can see I got a nice square cut there on this side, no bark showing. So we'll make another turn it another 90. Let me give you a little example here of what I'm doing and tell you what you can do. Okay, so if I look at that side of this, I can do the same thing that I did before, and I can measure and find the lowest spot. Now it's 7 inches right there. The rest of it I can see is higher. So if I cut 7 inches off the bunk, I'm going to be cutting it about right at this spot. Let me see what you're seeing. Yeah, right about here. Okay, so that'll end up giving me 7 nice boards. Now you could cut it a little less if you wanted to, but if you really look at this log here, it's wide here and the whole thing is sweeping down, comes back up, and then comes a little higher here. So you can't cut too high or you'll be out of the wood right there. So I'm just going to go down to the 7 inches, and that should give me a good clean cut all the way along there. We've really had some hot, wet weather here the past couple of days. Very warm, and the good thing is tonight it's supposed to go down into the 50s and not go much higher for the next week, maybe into the 60s. I'll be glad. That should be good for working outside. Just to let you know, a couple of things have taken place here in the past couple of weeks. For one thing, I had a new truck in there that I've had since 2006, and I just sold that truck the other day. I got a good amount of money for it. I was happy, the guy who bought it was happy, so that's one of the things that was kind of going on. I had to make room in the garage to get it out, and now I have a lot more room for my tools. And technically, I really don't have to build this 12-foot onto the garage, so I'm not in a hurry to build it. And especially since I don't have any real help, I'm not going to rush it. Okay, so 7 inches up off the bump. It should give me right there. Okay, so you can see there, with figuring the way I did, I have a flat cant there, a nice flat cant that's more than 8 inches wide. So I'm going to turn that another 90 and see if I can get 8 inches out of that. And then that'll give me 8-inch wide boards. If you remember, I was talking about having 12-inch wide boards, but some of the wood I have here is so nice that cutting 12 inches is a waste to use it on the garage, and some of these smaller boards will be fine for that anyway. But I would have liked 12-inch, but only because it's easier for me to count how many I need. Okay, so that's going to work out good there for 8 inches. So now I'm going to cut 8 inches off the bunk rail, and that'll give me an 8 by 7-inch cant. So I should be able to get at least 6 nice pieces of 1 by out of that. 1 by 8. Okay, so you've got a nice 8 by 7-inch cant there. So I'm going to roll it back 1 turn, I have 90 degrees back, and then I'll be able to cut boards out of that. When you see me cutting cants and you see flitches on the edges, that's because I'm trying to get as much out of it as I can. With this having knots and stuff in it, I figured I may as well get down to the cant size that I measured and be done with it, and I won't have to fool around with it. there's a little tiny bit of a flitch, or a little wane on here, I should say. Not much, not enough to make it mean anything right there. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut 1-inch boards out of this, and whatever they come up to be, however many I get, I'll be happy with that. .12 foot. When you're working with 12-foot lengths of cant, you want to look at the bump rail and make sure that the board's sitting down on the rail to full length so you get straight boards. It's not white oak, maple. Let you know how I'm measuring these. I'll show you this. Okay, so what I'm doing here, let me just get my glasses off so I can see better. What I'm doing here is I'm looking down through here, okay, and I'm looking at where the saw blade is. Now when the saw blade comes over to the board, I go back about maybe 6 inches on it, and I lower the blade down until it's just touching, not bent, just touching. So it scrapes off a little bit of sawdust. Then I look up here, and I know that 1 turn is 1 inch. So 1 turn would put me right there, right here. But what I want to be is a 1/16 over. So it gives me a hair more than the thick. It allows for a little bit of the thickness of the blade. So we'll see what I'm getting out of that, but that's how I've been cutting everything for the garage. So I'll cut that board and then I'll let you know what I have there size-wise. Now sometimes this works really well, depending upon the wear on the machine, or if there's something like sawdust holding you up. But either way, it works pretty good for a consistent cut over a period of time. So since I started cutting the garage boards that way in the beginning, I just stuck with that. So I go down, rest the saw blade on the board, just touching it, not bending it. Pull it back and go down 1 inch plus a 1/16 of an inch. That ends up with exactly 1 inch. So from the cut, dropping down 1 1/16 gives me an exact 1 inch board to work with. Okay, so when that dries, I doubt if it'll even go to 7/8, but might go to 7/8. It'll still be a good board, and most of these are going to be on the roof. So if there's a little variation, it's no big deal because the shingles will make that blend in anyway. So that's where I'm headed here. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I think there's 4 over there. 5. Now, let me just give you a little bit of advice here. If you have any wane on the bottom of this cant, now's the time you want to turn it over, because I'm not going to be cutting the bottom off of that to get an inch. I'm going to be cutting the top of it off. Now I know that we didn't have any wane on there, so we're going to let it go. But let's say you had some wane here. If you turned it over, you'll be cutting the wane off and end up with a nice square board. So I don't have that problem. So I'm just going to go ahead and measure up from the bottom. Now what I'm doing is I'm using the tape measure that's on the bunk, the rail here. So I'm going to come up 16th, and that should be good. Alright, so what I have here now is I have a piece about a 3/8 of an inch thick, which I'll scrapping for firewood. And then that bottom piece there, that's an inch thick. So I can use that for a board. Now the one thing I wanted to tell you is if I look real close at this, I can see that it's away in here. So it's warping outward. So if I get it on the shelf right away, it'll keep from doing that. And also, it's laying flat though. It's actually hitting all of the cant, or all of the bunk rails there, which is nice. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of these firewood here, and then I'll be back. But what I'm going to be doing then is taking those boards and putting them over on the pile over here. And that'll make good sheathing for me. Now, if you look at that, you'll see there's a split there in the one board. I'm not worried about that. If I had a lot of them, I might worry about it, but I'm not worried about a couple, because when you get around doors and windows, you'll be cutting the sheathing anyway. Alright, so we got to make sure we get cleaned up here. It rained on me the other day and I didn't get a chance to get it cleaned up.